When Bubba Wallace climbed out of his car after Atlanta, he was convinced NASCAR had made the wrong call. He believed he had done everything possible to avoid breaking the rules. He met with NASCAR officials, explained exactly what he was thinking on the final lap, and even pointed to the data from his car as proof that he wasn't trying to gain an unfair advantage. For several days, it looked like Bubba simply disagreed with NASCAR's decision. But now that conversation has taken an unexpected turn. After speaking with NASCAR and reviewing what happened, Bubba Wallace has admitted that he misunderstood one of the Cup Series' most important rules. Instead of continuing to argue, he accepted the penalty that turned one of his best finishes of the season into one of his biggest disappointments. So what changed Bubba's mind? Why did NASCAR refuse to overturn the call? And what lesson did the number 23 team take away from one of the most controversial finishes of the year? Let's break it all down. Atlanta looked like another strong weekend for 2311 racing. Bubba Wallace spent most of the race running near the front, and when the leaders took the white flag, he was in position to fight for a top finish. As Ryan Blaney and Carson Hocevar battled ahead, Wallace saw an opening and made his move, entering the final corners. Trying to keep his momentum, Bubba's car dropped below the yellow line before returning to the racing surface. He crossed the finish line believing he had secured second place, giving his team a huge result and valuable championship points. That celebration didn't last long. Within moments, NASCAR announced it was reviewing the final lap. Officials looked at the replay, reviewed the available data, and ruled that Wallace had improved his track position by driving below the yellow line. The decision completely changed the outcome of the race. Instead of finishing second, Bubba was officially scored 29th, losing both the finish and the points that came with it. Wallace didn't hide his frustration. Speaking after the race, he insisted he never intended to gain an advantage and believed his actions showed exactly that. He said, "The rule says advancing your position, which I did not do. I stayed third, and I was all over the brakes to make sure I did not advance." From Bubba's point of view, lifting off the throttle proved he wasn't trying to keep any advantage after going below the yellow line. The number 23 team also believed that should have been considered. After the race, Bubba, crew chief Charles Denicky, and members of 2311 Racing met with NASCAR officials to review the incident. They discussed the replay, looked at the telemetry, and explained why they felt the penalty should be reconsidered. But when the meeting ended, NASCAR didn't change its decision. The penalty stood. As expected, fans were divided. Some believed Wallace deserved to keep his finishing position because he clearly tried to give the spot back. Others argued that rules have to be enforced the same way for every driver, no matter how the situation unfolds. A few days later, NASCAR publicly explained why the ruling never changed. According to officials, the rule isn't based only on where a driver finishes. The important factor is whether a driver improves track position by going below the yellow line. Once that happens, the violation has already occurred, even if the driver immediately tries to give the position back. That explanation was different from the way Bubba had always understood the rule. At the time, however, he still believed the data from his car should have carried more weight. As the series moved on from Atlanta, many expected the debate to slowly fade away. Instead, Bubba Wallace arrived at North Wilkesboro with a completely different perspective, one that surprised both fans and the media. When Bubba Wallace met with reporters at North Wilkesboro, most people expected him to defend his position again. After all, he had spent the week explaining why he believed the penalty should have been viewed differently. Many assumed he would continue arguing that the data from his car proved he wasn't trying to gain an advantage. Instead, Bubba surprised everyone. Asked about the controversy, Wallace didn't sound angry or frustrated. In fact, His first response made it clear that he had already moved on. He said, "It is what it is," for a driver who had just lost one of the best finishes of his season. Those words said a lot. Rather than focusing on what NASCAR got wrong, Bubba focused on what he had learned from the situation. He explained that after speaking with officials and reviewing the rule more closely, he realized the issue wasn't being judged the way he had always believed. Wallace said, "We got a better understanding of the rule. To me, I always thought it was like gaining position, but no, it's gaining track position," which I totally did. That quote is really the heart of this entire story. The disagreement between Bubba and NASCAR wasn't about whether his car crossed below the yellow line. Everyone could see that happened. The disagreement came from how the rule was interpreted. For years, Wallace believed the rule was mainly about whether a driver gained a finishing position. If a driver gave the spot back or didn't complete the pass, he felt that should matter. NASCAR's interpretation was different. Officials viewed the move itself as the violation. Once a driver improves track position by going below the yellow line, the penalty can be applied regardless of what happens afterward. After hearing that explanation, Bubba realized why NASCAR never changed the ruling. That doesn't mean he suddenly liked the outcome. It simply meant he finally understood how officials were looking at the situation. Wallace also admitted that he expected NASCAR to place more value on the telemetry from his car. Throughout the week, he believed the data showed he was trying to correct the mistake before reaching the finish line. Speaking about that part of the discussion, Bubba said, "I thought they would care about the data that I tried to give the position back, but the damage was already done." That comment probably explains his frustration better than anything he said immediately after the race. From his perspective, he was actively trying to avoid benefiting from the move. From NASCAR's perspective, the violation had already happened before those corrective actions took place. Whether fans agree with that interpretation is another question entirely. Some fans still believe the punishment was too severe because Wallace wasn't trying to cheat the system. Others argue that NASCAR has to enforce the rule consistently, especially on superspeedways where inches can decide the outcome of a race. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to NASCAR Nation News for the latest NASCAR news, race analysis, and breaking stories from around the garage. Do you agree with NASCAR's decision? Or do you think Bubba Wallace should have kept his second-place finish after trying to give the position back? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.